Hey everybody, Kennis here. I hope you're doing great. I'm having a great day. I recently just got this amplifier used on Craigslist, and I've had it for 2 weeks, and I've yet to play it in a setting that I want to play it in. As soon as I got this, I brought this to rehearsal at my church. I played it at home. I was really excited about it. Brought it to church, and then it just sounded like junk. And you know, if you've ever experienced that, that's always very frustrating. So buying something you're excited about and not getting to play it. So I went home and turned it on, flipped it around to see if the tubes were working, and sure enough, one of the tubes was not working. And this is actually the tube right here. That's what I got. This is actually the tube right here that I pulled out. You know, it's literally, it was sitting up like this, you know, in the slot where the tube goes, and I literally pulled it down. Actually, didn't pull it hard, just kind of wiggled it, and it went boom, just like that. And so that's what you can kind of do sometimes. I don't know what happened with the tube, if it hit something or what on the way there, but it is what it is, I guess. So I came home, and when I was testing it, grabbed one of these. This is an old Hammond tube from a Hammond tube organ, or Hammond organ. This was like a M103 or something like that. And this is an EL84, and it'd work. So I popped it in. Sure enough, the amp worked really good. But another problem presented itself is it's noisy now. And I'm going to turn this amp on. I don't have this cranked. I noticed that when the reverb's on more, you can hear it more, but I think that one of these tubes is just bad. So what I did was I ordered a whole new set of tubes just to see if it's any better. But I don't know if you can hear this here or not. There's a hiss. Let me pull this mic up close to it. You can hear what's happening. I'm going to turn it off, and hopefully you'll be able to hear exactly what it sounds like as it kind of farts out as you're even turning it off. You'll hear it kind of go like that. Listen to this. So, you know, it's not something that if you're playing live and you know, you have this thing cranked, you probably wouldn't hear it that bad. But for me, I do a lot of like home stuff, and I just can't deal with that. So I'm going to swap out the tubes. I ordered on Amazon a set of JJs, and so these I was just going to do one preamp tube just to test them out, but I accidentally ordered one preamp tube and three preamp tubes, 12 AX7s, and then I've got the EL84s here. So let me go ahead and swap these out. Tube amp maintenance is not as hard as some people make it out to be. They kind of make it like there's this like super mojo thing happening. And a couple things that I'd like to say that are not true. First of all, it's touching a tube. Some people say don't ever touch the tube with your fingers. It's going to make it explode. First of all, that's impossible because it's a vacuum tube. Okay, so if the reason why people think that, I think, is because if you look at like a halogen lamp, a halogen light, you know, it's got those, it looks kind of similar, you know, it's a glass light. And that, in fact, if you do touch it and you get oils on that glass, because it's not a vacuum, it's actually pressurized in there, that can cause an infrastructure problem within the glass and then cause it to explode. With tubes, because it's a vacuum, you know, there's no air in here. It's literally sucking in the walls, okay? And if you've done anything with engineering, you know that a circle is a cylinder is a very, very sturdy, there's a lot of sturdiness in a cylinder. That's why cans are not square, but they're round, because you can stack a ton of them on top of each other. That's why the cylinder is just very, very, very strong. So if the cylinder is sucking in, it's vacuumed in at all times, you know, it's a vacuum tube amp or a vacuum tube, then all the pressure is equally distributed in that cylinder. And so basically it's impossible for a vacuum tube to explode. Number one, because it's very, very sturdy. The cylinder is very sturdy. But number two, it's sucking in. So if something is sucking in, it can't explode. Okay, that's just the way that it is. Even when this one broke, it didn't explode. Okay, it just cracked and then didn't work any longer. Okay, the second thing that I want to say is, when you're working with a tube amp, there is an aspect of getting shocked that you just want to avoid. So, you know, it's very, very wise to unplug your amp, number one. But when you're replacing tubes, it's not rocket science. And so, unless you're taking some sort of like screwdriver and you're sticking it up inside the tube socket, you're not going to get shocked. Okay, it's just not going to happen. You know, don't. It's the same as saying like plugging something into the wall. Yeah, if you take your fingers and you're holding, if you take your fingers and you hold them like this and start plugging into the wall, yeah, you're going to shock yourself. Okay, but we plug stuff into the wall all the time without getting shocked. And so the same type of thing is going to happen here. Don't be holding them up like this to the very tips and plugging it in there. Yeah, you might get shocked somehow. When you do this, just use, especially like these tubes have been on for a little bit, I'm going to use some napkins here as I'm pulling them out, to make sure that that I'm not burning my fingers. And they do get very, very, very hot. So without further ado, let me just swap these guys out. It's not hard at all to do. You'll see this right now. All right, here on these power tubes, these have these like little springs that you kind of pull down and push to the side, and they just hold the tubes in. A lot of the older tube amps do not do this. And I like that they have those. It's, even if you have an old tube amp, if you can kind of upgrade that might even be a good upgrade to do. Once you're on here, just kind of get a decent grip on this and wiggle back and forth. Sometimes in a circular motion helps. And then eventually it just pops out just like that. So this is the original GT tube, and I'm going to do the same thing with this. And this is the old Hammond tube, and I think that that's the reason why that this amp sounds bad. It's like that old Hammond tube. And then let's go over and do our 12AX7s preamp tubes. There we go. That popped out. There we go. And we'll work on this guy again. Just saw this old Mars Music. I don't know if you guys ever remember Mars Music, but they were a big, kind of like a Guitar Center. Used to work there back in the day, early 2000s. All right, come on. There we go. Finally, that guy is there. Now, if you notice on these tubes, let me get up close here. For most tubes, at least the tubes that I've worked with, you'll notice that there's a gap. There's a gap right here on the 12AX7. There's a gap right here on the EL84. And most tubes that I've ever replaced, it's basically impossible to get them in wrong. Even on like the 6L6s, it's got like a little notch that basically makes it hard to get it in wrong. You just have to look at it and line up that gap with where the gap is. Sometimes you might have to take your cell phone, get in there if you don't have room, and just take a picture underneath the tube socket so you can see what it looks like. But I'm gonna just take these new tubes and put them in there. All right, I'm gonna use my phone and try to see the tube socket, and sure enough, let me take a picture. You can see it. So I'm just using that to guide me as I'm in here. So I'm putting it here. With this thing, you know what, I'm gonna take this thing off. All right, I'm gonna take this off so it's easier to see here. So I'm looking at it down below here at the bottom. I'm just placing this. Let me show you what I'm looking at. Take a picture. You know, that's essentially what I'm looking at. I'm seeing the tube socket underneath there, just so I can line up the tube pins correctly. And you know what, I'm gonna film this so that you guys can see it. All right, tube number 2. So the first one went in pretty well. Going in for number 2. Now your preamp tubes, you don't necessarily have to replace very often. and I kind of, like I said, I accidentally ordered 3. That's why I'm replacing all 3 of these. But usually, you know, your preamp tubes are pretty good. They usually don't have problems, and you don't have to replace them all when you replace your tubes. So you can, if your preamp tubes are fine, just swap out your power tubes, and vice versa. If you're you don't have to do them all. I like to do with your power tubes. I like to replace them both at the same time, or if you have an amp that has 4, I like to replace all 4 at the same time with a matched set of power tubes. Move over here. That one's a little bit harder to see. And what do people mean by matched set? You can see on this here that it says matched set. Basically what it does is when they are manufacturing tubes, you know, they've got thousands and thousands of them, and what they do is they don't necessarily make 2 exactly the same. What they do is they just test them all and make sure that they test the current. So like on this one, the current says 58, and I don't even know what this means, but transcond means or says 11250. So basically they put these on a tester and say, oh, this is a 58 current, and then they find another 58, and when they find 2 58s, they put them together and say, we're going to sell these as a matched pair. But when they're manufacturing them, it's not like they don't say, like, there's not a day where they said, hey, we're gonna make 58 current tubes, and then the next day we're gonna make a different tube. It doesn't work that way. They just come off the line and they match them up. So one tube, the next one off the line might be 60 on the current. So, all right, let's get up in here. Put this. These are a little bit easier because they don't have that surround on them. And you just push it up until it's seated in there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put this one on here because the magnet of the speaker is pulling it. So just push that back on there like that. You can see this magnet, and sometimes these come off. There we go. Again, I'm just wiggling back and forth, getting them in there. Doesn't take a whole lot of pressure, but it takes some. All right, push these guys back on. There's just, what these are, there's just a spring at the bottom here. You can kind of see that there. There's just a spring at the bottom, and that's what pushes up into it. It's got a little notch here that it notches. You just push it up through the notch and twist it, and there it is. All right, now we're gonna turn off the lights again, turn this guy on, see if it powers up, plug it in. All right, power. Let's see what happens. Let me turn this main one off. Maybe we can see it glowing a little bit. There we go. Oh, let me take these tube covers off here. Yep, that one's glowing. That one's glowing. And that one's glowing. 3 right there. I don't know if you can see that on there or not. Now let's see here. So they're working, but I don't know if you can hear this. Let me put the mic up to it. It's still got that sound. It sounds like it's going in conjunction with the flashing of this, which is the standby. Hopefully it won't be loud when I turn it on. Here we go. Man, I don't understand that. That is you hear that? Everything is down. All the volume is down. Anyway, maybe that's just an issue with the with this Bassbreaker, but I'm a little discouraged with that. But anyway, that's how you retube an amp. I'm gonna try to work on this a little bit more, see if I can figure out what the deal is, why that's still humming and making that much noise. It should be pretty quiet. So that's how you replace them. Again, there's a lot of misinformation out there about tube amps and how to do maintenance on them. You know, you take this into a shop and you say, hey, I want to retube my amp. It sounds like you got like all kinds of things happening. There's some, you know, mad scientist in the back that's doing some crazy work on your amp. The reality is there's not a whole lot to it. I mean, like you just saw, it was just pulling it out, putting new ones in. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button. And hey, if this is the first time you've ever seen one of my videos, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. My videos, I try to make videos that are helping musicians become better musicians. Sometimes it's playing, sometimes it's even things like this, just things with our equipment. So anyway, Kennis Russell out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.